We all like stories, but often I think we make the story mistake. So what do I mean by the story mistake? What's the story mistake? Well, I think it's a mistake to think that story works only for entertainment. It's a mistake to think that story is not good for work and business, that we can't use story in business, that we can't use story power at work. And it's also, I think, a mistake to think that story is not important for language teaching and learning, or learning in general. We can think about story in light of inversion, where you kind of flip the idea upside down. So don't use story power if you want to be a forgettable communicator. Wow, okay. I want to be forgettable. Don't use story power if you want to make language learning harder. Yeah, I'd like to really make this hard for you, right? And don't use story power if you want to make teaching and learning less powerful, less enjoyable, and less memorable. In other words, if you want teaching to be more boring, less effective, all of those things, then don't use story power. So here's the key point. Use story power to enhance acquisition, teaching, and communication in languages. I'm Joseph Polshock, aka Dr. Shock. My PhD is in linguistics from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and Scotland is great. I have over 25 years experience teaching English to English learners and over 10 years experience teaching English teachers how to teach English. And I have published books and chapters and articles, and today I'll be focusing on two of those. One is entitled Language Teaching with Story Logic, and the other one is entitled Teaching Language and Communication with Story Logic. You can see the references at the end of this presentation. And if you like this video, and if it benefits you in any way, please like and subscribe or give me some feedback so I can learn how to do it better. I appreciate that. All right, so what is story and what is story-powered learning? Let's start with some definitions. In stories, we meet a character who has goals and motives, desires and ambitions, and in order to reach those goals and ambitions and desires and things, the character meets trouble and conflict and risk and danger, and then in the end attempts to extricate him or herself from that danger. Extrication is a great word in this case. It means to free someone from difficulty. So again, in stories, we meet a character with goals and motives who faces trouble, conflict, risk, and dangers and struggles, and then attempts to extricate him or herself. And that is a definition of story that comes from this amazing book by Jonathan Gottschall called The Storytelling Animal. Again, references are at the end of this presentation. So there is a lot of research about story, a lot. And if you want to know more, I recommend Kendall Haven's amazing book, Story Proof. Check it out. All right. And we've also done some of our own research on story. We compared learners' responses to two texts that shared the same information about a famous dog by the name of Chaser, the dog who learned 1,000 words. So these two texts shared the same information about the dog, but text number one was in story form. In other words, text number one was story powered, and text number two was not a story, it was a non-story. So let's take a basic summary overview of this research. All right, so both texts gave the same facts about Chaser, the dog who learned 1,000 words. Group 1 read a story-powered text with facts about Chaser set in the 3 keys of story that I just mentioned, right? And group number 2 read a non-story text with the same facts, but the text did not use the 3 keys of story. And again, remember those 3 keys, right? It's character, who has a goal or desire, who meets conflict and trouble and danger and risk, and attempts to extricate him or herself from that trouble in order to reach the goal or the dream or the ambition. All right, so group number 1 read the story-powered text, and group number 2 read the non-story text. So here were the results, all right? So with the story-powered version, the difficulty was the same as the non-story version, so the learners found those texts equal in difficulty, right? But in the story-powered version, the learners liked the characters more, and in the non-story version, the learners liked the characters less, right? In the story-powered version, the students enjoyed the text more, and in the non-story version, the students enjoyed the text less. In the story-powered version, the learners remembered more, and in the non-story version, the learners remembered less, and of course, in the story-powered version, they also understood the text better. You can check out the results to that study. Just look at the reference list, and I think you can find that article online for an easy PDF download. All right, so here we see some solid evidence that supports story-powered language learning. All right, and again, if you want to know more, check out Kendall Haven's amazing book, Story Proof: The Science Behind the Startling Power of Story. So the question becomes, how can we do story-powered language teaching and learning? How can we do this, right? So one thing we can do is adapt Krashen. Here's his most famous, most central theory. We can adapt it to story-based or story-powered teaching. He says, we acquire languages by understanding messages.
We acquire language in only one way. This is the big moment. When we understand messages. That's it.
So when we adapt Krashen's famous theory, this is the most basic theory in, I think, second language acquisition, second language teaching. When we adapt it to story-powered learning, we can put it like this. We better acquire languages by understanding story-powered messages. And I think Krashen refers to this in another theory that he calls the compelling input hypothesis. And I'm sorry, I don't have a reference for that one, but you can search for it online, the compelling input hypothesis. But all we need to do is adapt Krashen's theory. We better acquire languages. We more effectively acquire languages by understanding story-powered messages. And why do we need a theory? Well, because theory guides teaching and learning choices. So again, how can we do story-powered learning and teaching? Right, so of course, use powerful fiction that's at the right level of the learners. Remember, it's by understanding messages, so the messages have to be understanding. So use powerful fiction. Sorry, the messages have to be understandable, right? I'm losing my English. I gave it away at work. Use powerful fiction at the right level to boost emotion, motivation, interest, memorability, and all of those things. And then also use story-powered nonfiction that has a character with goals who faces trouble and who attempts extrication. So then we have that as well for nonfiction as well. I like to say the word as well. Okay, so and remember that my website, ReadOasis.com, basically follows this theory where learners use the stories at ReadOasis to master English with story power. We can use story power in old school grammar activities, and I'm going to give a very brief example of this here. This is Laird. He's a big wave surfer. Let's watch him. All right, so here's the dialogue. Everybody practice it together. What is he doing? Repeat after me or whatever. And he is surfing. You can have the students do this in pairs or whatever if you want to. Have them practice a very basic grammar point. And then I'm going to open a story loop. That's a big wave. What's going to happen? And with a story loop, you create a little bit of suspense. And the students are like, well, what is going to happen? And they're waiting to find out. All right, we can do a few more of these dialogues based on some dramatic scenes. What is she doing? She is flying. Looks dangerous. I wonder what's going to happen. What's going to happen? Again, I open a story loop, okay? And then we see these two guys. What are they doing? They are fighting. Wow, looks scary. Who's going to win? So in each case, I opened a story loop, but for just example purposes, I'm going to only close one of them, and that's the surfing loop. I'm going to close it here, okay? So let's go back to Laird. He's surfing a big wave. What is happening to him? What is going to happen, right? And so now we have this picture of Laird wiping out. What's he doing? He is crashing. So in this particular case, I used a traditional grammar style conversational activity like the ones in Side by Side, a famous grammar book, but I opened a story loop at the beginning and then closed it at the end. So, you can use video with this or AI generated images, but it's a way to use traditional activities with story spice. All right. So how can we do story-powered learning and teaching? Well, use story-powered fiction and nonfiction, and help learners acquire language by understanding story-powered messages. And I gave that definition of story earlier, where a character who has trouble, who attempts extrication. That's what I mean by a story-powered messages, right? So there's those three key elements inside that material, that text. That's a story-powered message. So we want to help learners acquire language by understanding story-powered messages. And I've given that clear definition of story. And then again, we can mix story power with traditional activities. There's a lot of things we can do, a lot of ways we can expand on this idea. But that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you like this video, please do like and subscribe or give me some feedback so I can get better somehow. And again, in conclusion, story-powered learning enhances acquisition, teaching, and communication in languages.